Yesterday we have discussed about literary research and in general what is meant by research. Let us move further and find out how to look at the subject and how it is to be find literary research. As I said you yesterday, Tyrus book about literary research and how Hilvey has given three different types of research. Furthermore, there are few books which helps student to get initiated into literary research. To name few, Altick's book Altick, Altick, and Altick's very interesting book, The Scholar Adventurers, written in 1950, or Sanders' book Sander, Sanders' book, An Introduction to Research in English Literary History, written in 1951. Again, Altick's another book written in 1963, The Art of Literary Research, or Bateson, Bateson, Bateson's book, The Scholar Critique, An Introduction to Literary Research, written in 1972. These are certain books, and these are original and scholarly contribution into the world of research. And a student who is initiating into literary research, he would find some discovering facts about literary research, how to move ahead with literary research. We have to understand, we have to understand the word itself. Literary research is actually a phrasal formation. It is composed of two terms. One is literary, other is research. In this phrasal formation, the first word literary is used as qualifier for research. A literary research is established, this word coined and established later on, when literary studies grow in volume in various departments of English, departments of literature in English. If you see very closely, literary research is on the surface seems to be a very attractive term. It is interesting. It is trying to give us a sense of modernity. It deals with human material, and this is primarily concerned that man is the creator of literary art. Please make it clear, my friends, that it is distinct from social sciences and psychology. Sometimes, what happens when you try to move into research, when you start pursuing your research, it seems to demonstrate an overlap overlap of interest within these fields: sciences, social sciences, and psychology. Literary research uses history to understand the various intellectual, social, and artistic milieus, the milieus that provide raw material of experience, and explore the so-called catalytic process, which is called in a very simple word as imagination. Imagination to create literary work, because literary work is based on imagination. That's why you will find out most of the writers, theorists, they talked about imagination. S.T. Coleridge, T.S. Eliot, even Sir Philip Sidney, even Plato, Aristotle, all these people, they discussed about imagination, which plays a very crucial role in developing literary work. Now, for understanding all these aspects, we require support of certain different disciplines, certain different subjects. It could use psychological techniques to probe into the private temperament, the motivations, the prejudice of a poet, of a writer, or you can say how the writer lived, what are his psychological conditions. Certain psychological tools we use in research, or it could use history, as you will find out. Sir Philip Sidney is telling that history and philosophy are part of understanding of literature. So it could use history, psychology to explore the inner soul of man, as well as the contemporary circumstances which combine to make literary work uh, what it is look like. You can say even that this literary work becomes an historical account of man in his imaginative intellectual capacity. This literary research, my friend, this literary work, it may need to deal with puzzling contradictions, concealments, and certain inexplicable silences that you will find out in literary history of a particular period or work. If you look back into history of literature in English, you will find out there is a dark period where no literary work was produced at that time. This dark period, where the literary work was not produced, is having a sort of inexplicable silences that we have to search. The researcher is trying to search this. So there are certain periods where you will find out there are certain contradictions, there are certain concealments, there are certain inexplicable silences. And what a researcher is expected to aim at? Literary research aims at seeking to repair, because it is not, you cannot undo like you can play in a computer or your mobile, you can undo the things. No, here it is not possible. You cannot undo certain things in history. Or you can able to find out how damage done due to falsification, distortion, or destruction of the record located in history or biography. Because when you consider literature as an imaginative art, there might be certain distortions, certain falsifications. You'll find out when you read the very famous novel written by, I'm forgetting the name, Kamlesh in Hindi. Kitne Pakistan? It was translated in English, how many Pakistans? And there you will find out how he is trying to find out the historical falsification, distortions that you will find out in history. Please remember one thing, my friends. History is again a topic of debate where lots of critiques, lots of scholars used to say that history is always created by the people who are victorious. There is no place for losers, but there might be one side of losers also that is not taken care. So it is the literary work of art which are not represented, and researcher is trying to find out whether it is properly painted or not, it is properly projected or not. And that's why there's a sharp sense of discovery and perseverance, because the researcher who may have to factor in and contend it with certain accidents of life, accidents of fate, human errors, or even he can find out there are certain destruction of literary works or certain historical records of given period. Nowadays, you will find out, my friends, there are lots of writing appearing in English also. Especially Indian English, if you see, there are retelling of mythologies. You'll find out lots of novels coming in front of us in retelling of mythology, where you'll find out Amish Tripathi is talking about the mythologies, or even Ananda Nilakanthan is talking about mythologies, retelling the stories once again from others' perspective. If you read the very famous novel of Ananda Nilakanthan, Asura, where he is talking from talking of Ramayana from Ravana's perspective, what Ravan feels, what Ravan felt at that time when the situations are taking place. Now, if you see all these writings, if you see all these works which are going, and when a researcher is trying to find out certain aspects from these fictions, these novels, then my friend, you need to have certain sharp sense of discovery and perseverance with you. Because research, literary research may need to address and solve the intricate mystiques. And for solving these intricate mystics, he requires to take certain methods available with him or her. And that makes most of the time the work monotonous. We feel it difficult sometimes. We think that it is going to be, there is no variety, there is no change because you are following some methods available in different disciplines also. You have to use those methods, as I said, either from history or psychology or philosophy. You have to use it. The primary focus of literary studies and literary research in its earlier manifestation was for the most part on the study of language. We try to find out. We are searching for what sort of research should take place. And if you see back, there are various studies based on study of language only, rather than moving towards the literary aspects of that particular text. The research is located in the language itself. And the study of language, most of the research has taken place. The study of language, especially in its historical and comparative aspects, and the category in which this studies has taken place, the category is philology. In philology, you study language from historical and comparative perspective. Early research has taken place into these fields. This research made the subject very much important amongst the various departments across the universities in the world. And this fascination with those aspects to study language, it began to give literary research a different shape and identity of a serious type of research. There were different forays, different areas. Forays made into biographies. Study of biographies with the perception of linguistic and literary history. A student who is enrolling for literary research was expected to have a good grounding of world classics. If you are entering into a literary research, you should have certain knowledge about world classics, the classic books. And A student, besides this knowledge of world classics, he should have a knowledge of few disciplines within social sciences, because it is not, you can say, commonly understood in the classes of literature that student of literature needs to have understanding of various kinds of subjects. You cannot say because I am a student of English literature, I am not familiar with what is written in Marathi literature. Yes, you have to, because it is your regional language, or sometimes it is your mother tongue. When you are studying literature in English, when you are pursuing your studies in MA in English, it doesn't mean that I am not interested in reading of any of the literature. We have to, as a student of literature, to read literatures across the languages. Maybe it is not possible to be familiar with all the languages, but it is available in translations, whatever available in translations, so that we can able to understand what sort of different dimensions, different approaches, different understanding that rest of the literature is taking care of. Unfortunately, most of the students are not interested in understanding the different languages and different literatures available in translations, at least. Apart from that, a student of literature who is entering into a research in future, who is entering into a research, he should be getting familiar with certain disciplines like philosophy. And that's why, if you see very carefully the combination that you have in the department of our department, you have various elective papers. They are ranging from philosophy to psychology to films to non-fiction to creative writing. We are trying to make our student to get familiar with all those things, because his research can, if he is interested in entering into the field of research, he should get familiar with most of the things. You cannot deny, you cannot reject, you cannot say that I am not familiar with what is happening in the world of literature. So you should get, at least know certain disciplines within social sciences, such as philosophy, logic and rhetoric, anthropology, aesthetics, political history, sociology, psychology, economics, understanding the various models of liberal arts. That's why, my friends, although most of the sections in society feel that if you're pursuing your post graduation in English means that you are simply reading poetry, drama, novel, that's all. No. A student of literature is always pursuing his knowledge from various these disciplines that I have talked about. You have to be familiar with anthropology, you have to be familiar with aesthetics, you have to be familiar with political history. If I'm talking about Shakespeare, for example, who is a very known dramatist, known writer in English, if you ask anyone, everyone knows about Shakespeare. But if you talk about Shakespeare, what was the political history when he started writing his work? How Shakespeare represented his characters, from where these characters are coming. How Shakespeare developed his ideas of all the dramas that we used to read. What was the political history of England at that time? Why Shakespearean heroes in tragedy are not from proper England. They are from other parts of United Kingdom. If you know it, United Kingdom is actually made up of four states. One state is England, and English is the language of England itself. Please understand this. This is a political history. You cannot avoid it. UK is made up of four states. Being a student of English literature, you should get familiar with this fact also. Although it is a political map and political history and political science. Ireland, Scotland, Welsh, and England. These are the four states. And English is not the language of United Kingdom. English is a language of England only. One small state that if you try to understand it, it is something like Maharashtra in India. Marathi is the language of not all India. Marathi is the language of Maharashtra. Similarly, English is the language of England only. Ireland speak Irish, Scotland speaks Scottish, Welsh speak Welsh language. But because English or England has a political history, it ruled over all the world, and that's why England promoted its language, and that's why this language became universal, and lots of things we can talk hours and hours together on that particular topic. So you cannot say that student of literature should not be get familiar with what exactly is the political history. What is the economic history? How economics played a crucial role in making of the characterization of any of the literary work that we study. We have to, being a student of research, we have to understand certain disciplines. Friends, literary research, as I said yesterday also, has always been a qualitative kind of research. Why it is qualitative? It is qualitative because it involves the exploration of qualities or features that define the approach used. A literary author or authors studied or literary text explored or literary sources identified and classified historical facts and fictional accounts. All these things you have to locate in the research. And when you are locating these things in research, you rely heavily on the library as your major source. Because all those things you will get it from library. It is this research, as I said you right from the beginning, that research in literature is not possible in any laboratory. Research in literature is carrying the sources of library most of the time. This has developed its own paradigm because research in literature is subjective more than the objective. Scientific research is more objective, to the point. Taking only one material and trying to find out what exactly it is. It is said some of the times in a lighter tone that you can even make a research on a drop of water also. So objective, so minute. Atom, ATOM, atom. You can research on atom, very smaller aspect. This is objective. But literature, when you try to research in literature, it is subjective. You cannot be so much objective in literature. And the subjective element is inevitable. and you can say it is quite unavoidable due to the fact that literary research explores psyche. Literary research explores emotions. Now, if you're exploring emotions, you are not able to be very objective for that. You have to be subjective. What literary research is locating? Literary research is finding, exploring the psyche, the emotions, the attitude, the dispositions. All these things are symbolized in a character or a work of writer, or you are defining or you are finding the patterns of behavior. All these things, if you are exploring, if you are researching, if you are locating, then the paradigm should be subjective. Balki, Blaiki, sorry, Blackie in 1993, my friends. Blackie has taken the positivistic research paradigm. Blackie, in his very known book, Approaches to Social Inquiry, he has said that we have to take a post-positivistic research paradigm if you are trying to find out a subjective approach, subjective research. Because you have to follow interpretivist methodology, interpretivist mode, research model or research paradigm, or constructivist research paradigm you have to follow. Because this paradigm lays its emphasis on twin acts of interpretation, where a researcher seeks to discover and bring the meaning of given creative work, and construction, that is explanation and rearrangement of what is so discovered and interpreted to arrive to the meaning of the subject. It is commonly said by most of the other, you will also face, if you come to the, if situation permits, and if you come to the department, and if you come to the university, you will find various students coming of different disciplines, and when you meet the students of different disciplines, at that time there might be the question and there might be the certain talk with the students, and at that time you will find out that those students are saying that what you do in research, in literature, you simply write down the story once again, you paraphrase the story. When you try to write down answer in your examination, uh, while writing answers in your examination is a sort of practice of writing or academic writing, a sort of research. You try to narrate the story once again. When you're narrating the story, what you are doing, you are trying to rearrange the whole thing and try to explain that this is how these emotions are coming out. Because it is almost, if you see the postmodern approach, that there is no one meaning of a text, there are multiple meanings of a text. You cannot say there is only one meaning for the text. No, there are multiple meanings for the text. Similarly, in the interpretivist methodology, when you're trying to interpret certain things, because this interpretivist methodology is based on the belief that there are multiple realities. These multiple realities helps us to arrive at the meaning, uncovering the meanings, trying to find out the contextual factors, those contextual factors that influenced the writer. Because it is again a modernist and postmodernist approach that you need to understand the text with the help of context, and the text is not complete without context. I'll make it little bit simple for us to understand. And you may say, sir, it is going to be a little bit difficult because we are thinking that what exactly how to look at research, and it is going to be a little bit difficult for us to understand. Please remember one thing, my friends. A text is not complete without context. It is a very important thing to understand. It will help you in understanding rest of the literary works that you are studying. Why somebody behaves in one particular fashion. If you find certain character in a fictional world is getting angry, so there might be certain reasons that he is getting angry. Those reasons are context, making him to behave accordingly. Why you behave in that particular fashion? Because there are certain causes and reasons that are behind this behavior. That's why if you try to understand any text, you need to understand the context of it, that why, on which background this is happening. If I want to prove something is white, I need to put a background of black so that you can able to find out, yes, this is what it is called as a white. So context is most important. So interpretivist methodology think that there are multiple realities and which arrive at the meaning. There might be a reality which is not explained by anyone, and you in your research trying to find out that unexplained reality. The researcher draws upon his academic experience. He's using inductive reasoning, which is based on logic, and that's why I said logic and rhetorics are important. Researcher or literary researcher is primarily concerned with interpretation and construction, and constructing and reconstructing the meanings of the text. And that's why, my friends, we need to understand the complete meaning of it. And that's why you will find out, my friend, that literary research helps us to analyze, evaluate literary or artistic work, put into good use of methods which are supported by literary theories. And that's why next units are of literary theories. You can able to find out whether that literary work is, you can say, not good or bad, but you can evaluate its merits and demerits. It will simply gives you to understand the very, very typical term used by Immanuel Kant and Michel Foucault, the term called enlightenment. Enlightenment is a person's gradual maturity or a state of mind which is strong enough to raise him from the state of dependence. He's dependent on someone, and so he's getting out of it and becoming self-dependent, self-reliance. The process which makes him to become self-dependent, self-reliant is enlightenment. And in strictly technical term, if we speak, the term is criticism. When criticism is used in literary studies and research, means the analysis and evaluation of literary works and art with the support of literary theories. Because with the help of literary theories, we are reaching to certain maturity. Because we are dependent on some ideas, but to understand it, but to get it in a proper way, to locate, we have to be enlightened. And the research, what Altic says, is seeking to illuminate the work of art. It is not devaluating the work of art. It is illuminating the work of art. It is trying to see the cultural heritage. It is trying to find out what is this place of this literary work of art in contemporary circumstances. And for that, you require to have good understanding, self-determination, self-dependence, a strong, mature understanding. And this strong, mature understanding can be achieved through research process. And that's why you need to have good understanding not only of the people or nation, but understanding of literary history also. If you are trying to locate your subject, you're trying to find out your subject in research, you need to have an understanding of literary history. Altic argued it very, very, very perfectly. And Altic said, and I quote, I read his quotation. Altic argues that literary history constitutes one of the strands of which the history of civilization itself is woven. Because if you are simply trying to understand literary history, you are understanding the history of civilizations, my friend. If you try to understand the historical perspective, historical sense, as you find it out in Eliot's very famous essay, Tradition and Individual Talent, written in 1990, or his very famous essay, What is Classic, written in 1944, where he talked about the concept of maturity. Literary history or understanding of civilization, or what Collingwood observed, that the value of history is that teaches us what man has done and thus what man is. And that's why a student of literature who is pursuing his research, who is trying to enter into the research, who is trying to locate his subjects in research, need to have good command of literary history, history of literary criticism. It always helps the literary researcher with the necessary background of knowledge, that he can enter into the area of research with a sort of confidence that he's familiar with history of literature, he's familiar with history of literary criticism. And friends, even these two things are most important if you are trying to appear for UGC's NET and SET examinations. Because if you are familiar with history of literature, if you are familiar with history of literary criticism, then and then it is possible for you to be a good interpreter, good analyzer, good commentator, good teacher of English. And that's why you'll find out the literary research helps us to bring into the light certain fresh facts on the literary text, and that's why no literary text is old. Even you can study any literary text at any moment of time. Shakespeare's drama, you cannot say that Shakespeare wrote drama 400, 450 years back. What is the relevance of that drama today? No, you have to understand Shakespearean drama once again with a new perspective, considering the contemporary circumstances and contemporary situations. The contemporary attack of virus on human civilization is not new. Our generation, I can say, more enough is little bit, whether you believe it or not, fortunate that we are able to see this kind of situation. The attack of virus on human civilization. You have seen it in history. Plague used to come, and plague was the disease where people will die and people will get in lockdown, closed down, and try to make them certain isolated. Then Spanish flu. We have read all those things in history. We have not experienced it. Now we are experiencing it. How human civilization is trying to overcome with all those things. Tomorrow it is going to be history when you can say we are the part of history. How those literary texts reflect that particular situation at that time. If you try to compare that same circumstances with today's condition, you have to familiar with the literary history. You have to familiar with the history of literary criticism. And that's why you will find out, my friends, what Eliot says. Maturity of mind needs history and the consciousness of history, which comes from an appreciation of other history along with one's own ability to see where we stand vis-a-vis the others in the history. We have to understand. It is also, my friend, an understanding of how other influenced and entered into our own. There are always two sides, self and other. It is very common behavior of every human being, if you see it very carefully, that if some dangerous situation comes, immediately we split into two. We are self and there are others. We try to secure ourselves first, because I am self, I am securing myself first, then thinking of others. I think all of us have read the story of that monkey, the small monkey and his mother. They were in the pond, and the water starts getting up. First, the mother monkey took her child on her shoulder, and then when she find that now the water is getting up, she put that child down and she stand on that and she tried to get out of it. So when danger comes, people's, even your blood relations will not work. So how self and others, how others entered into our self home. These things we need to understand. Literary research is actually, my friend, is the summation of what the scholars read. How will you read the things? How will you interpret the thing? How will you experience the thing? And how you reflect those things? And these reflections, which leads to eventually replace the old facts with new facts. That's why I said when you read a literary work which is talking about the disease attack of viruses on human beings, now you try to replace that old fact with the new fact of this virus attacking on human beings. So it seeks to interpret the significance of this material in terms of literary art, my friends. And that's why we are recreating literary research. When you are locating topic in research, you are recreating mentally the social, intellectual, and literary conditions of past age, and make himself as well as an inmate spectator of the inner life of that greatest artist. Because you are trying to date with authenticity of text, various versions, various editions of it, etc., etc., because you are trying to find out what exactly are the facts represented there in that particular text. And that's why literary research is not dependent on what have become classics, or because once you keep certain text into the broad area of classics, then you think that we should not once again touch to it, we should not read it once again because it's a classic, how can I change it? No, you can interpret the classics. And that's why you will find out the sort of every detail, because research and locating the subject in research involves a training to the mind to recreate in as minute and faithful detail as possible the social, intellectual, and literary conditions of the past age, will make him to understand. Somehow you can say it is a historical detective work you are doing. And that's why locating a subject in research requires inquisitive minds. And if a literary researcher is trying to find out what Wilbur Scott, a renowned writer, wrote his very famous book called Five Approaches to Literary Criticism, which he wrote in 1962, Wilbur Scott, where he had used widely the literature courses in 70s and 80s and identifies five approaches. When you locate for research, he's pointing out how you will find out what sort of criticism you can able to find out to locate and to work on. Wilbur Scott in 70s, 80s find out five approaches: moral, psychological, sociological, formalistic, and archetypal. These are the five approaches that Wilbur Scott: moral, psychological, sociological, formalistic, and archetypal. Some others approaches he has added into this list: autobiographical, feminist reading, reader response reading, deconstruction reading, postmodern reading, modern reading, structural reading. Because the methods of literary research discussed in various recent books includes archival methods, autobiography as a research method, oral history as a research method, visual methodologies, discourse analysis, ethnographic methods, textual analysis, interview method, creative writing methods. There are hundreds and hundreds of methods being added into it to find out, to get the literary research, because a literary scholar is supposed to examine and ascertain the facts that governing the creation of literary text. And if he or she is able to get it, locate it properly, then it will be easy for them to reach to the particular understanding of that particular